Hi, my name is Ivy Cibrano. I teach 6th grade English Language Arts at school number 8.
Hi, I'm Joe LaTorre, and I'm an English teacher for Team 7-2 at Oceanside Middle School.
Hi, I'm Donna Gales. I teach language arts at school 2, 6th grade.
My favorite part was from the chapter The Rest of the First Tale, and this is when Connor is talking to the monster. There is not always a good guy, nor is there always a bad one. Most people are in between. Connor shook his head. That's a terrible story and a cheat. It is a true story, the monster said. Many things that are true feel like a cheat. Kingdoms get the princes they deserve. Farmers' daughters die for no reason, and sometimes witches merit saving. Quite often, actually. You'd be surprised. I like this passage because I thought it was very true in life, that things are not always as they seem.
I read from the subsequent chapter, which is called Understanding. And the part that I read, the passage that I read, dealt with sort of the real monsters that Connor is facing, particularly Harry. I thought it was an interesting chapter to have because you've just come out of this lesson where, not everyone's a good guy, not everyone's a bad guy. People are in shades of gray. And yet here we have Harry, and he is pretty much bullying Connor, but I would say that it goes beyond that. It's almost sadistic in what he does. So I'll just read briefly from the passage in Understanding. This time, Harry's fist was in his stomach. Connor fell to the ground, scraping his knee on the concrete step, tearing a hole in his uniform trousers. The hole was the worst part of it. He was terrible at sewing. "Are you sick or something, O'Malley?" Sully said, laughing behind him somewhere. "It's like you fall every day." "You should go to a doctor for that," he heard Anton say. "Maybe he's drunk," Sully said, and there was more laughter, except for a silent spot between them where Connor knew Harry wasn't laughing. He knew without looking back that Harry was just watching him, waiting to see what he would do. As he stood, he saw Lily against the school wall. She was with some other girls, heading back inside at the end of break time. She wasn't talking to them, just looking at Connor as she walked away. "No help from Super Pool today," Sully said, still laughing. "Lucky for you, Sully," Harry said, speaking for the first time. Connor still hadn't turned his back to face them. He could tell Harry wasn't laughing at Sully's joke. Connor watched Lily until she was gone. "Hey, look at us when we're talking to you," Sully said, burning from Harry's comment, no doubt, and grabbing Connor's shoulder, spinning him around. "Don't touch him," Harry said, calm and low, but so ominously that Sully immediately stepped back. "O'Malley and I have an understanding," Harry said. "I'm the only one who touches him. Isn't that right?" Connor waited for a moment and then slowly nodded. That did seem to be the understanding. And I just felt like that really sets apart who Harry is as a villain. He's not your typical schoolyard bully. He has just sort of a long mental game that he's playing with Connor, and I think that's probably the most troubling thing, but the most monstrous thing, especially after the chapter that Ms. Cibrano just read.
And I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Little Talk, and my favorite part was, "That's a yew tree, she finally said. Connor rolled his eyes, but not in a bad way. "Yes, Mom, you've told me 100 times. Keep an eye on it for me while I'm away, will you?" she said. "Make sure it's still here when I get back." And Connor knew this was her way of telling him she was coming back. So all he did was nod, and they both kept looking out the tree, which stayed a tree, no matter how long they looked. And I just liked that part because I felt it was showing the bond between Connor and his mom and giving Connor hope that his mom is going to be okay.
Okay, so let's discuss a bit what's happened so far. We have Connor, and he's struggling on a few different fronts. His mother is ill with cancer, and he's having a lot of trouble at school. His father is not in the picture at the moment, and now he's being visited by this monster from the yew tree outside of his house. And there's a bit of, a difficulty in deciding, is this monster real? Is this monster in his head? What is this monster? And on top of all of that, he's dealing with some real problems at school, both between himself and Lily, who was his friend, and now who he's sort of avoiding, as well as with Harry, who's the school bully, and sort of takes a different approach in bullying him than you would typically see.
I think that the lesson that the monster was teaching in the first tale is that really things aren't what they seem, and that the prince made everybody believe that it was the queen who killed his wife, but in essence it was really him. And people will believe what you tell them, and then if you say it often enough, you sometimes will believe it yourself. And I think that he was trying to say that things aren't what they seem, and that everybody has their own version of what the truth is.
I think that, I really kind of agree with you. I think the idea of, believing your own lie to the point where you've convinced yourself it's true, I thought that was kind of a cool take from the monster to Connor, because I think that plays a large role in Connor's identity. And I thought it was just a cool literary approach. It reminded me of Game of Thrones. Like, none of the characters in that are true heroes or true villains. They're all sort of painted with shades of gray. And just when you get into the whole kings and castles and stuff, that was the first thought that came to my head.
And I know when I was reading it, I wanted to believe the prince's truth also, and then I was almost surprised, like Connor was, that that the monster ended up saving the queen, who really turned out to be a witch. And I thought she was the bad guy, and she was bad in her own right, but she wasn't a murderer. And I think that's what the point was, the point that the tree was trying to make.
I think Connor pushed away Lily because Lily told the class, all of his friends, that his mom had cancer, and now he feels that his friends are treating him differently because of it. They can't look at him. They've kind of backed away because they don't know how to handle the situation of such a sensitive topic of cancer. So I feel it's why she's pulling away. He's pulled away a little.
This whole overall theme about truth, I think, keeps coming up. The tree wants Connor to find his truth, and maybe that's why he's pushing Lily away, is because that really was the truth. Really, what was happening with his mom, that was his truth, but he really wasn't ready to face it. She went and told everybody, and it wasn't really her story to tell.
The reason why I think his mother focuses him on the tree is, I think it's probably a symbolic thing. You talk about trees and, strength and age and wisdom and all that. Those are connotations that are often associated with the tree. And then the yew tree supposedly has this healing power. And I think when, you're in a situation like that, you look for things, you look for spirituality to get you through it. And I think the tree is just an extension of that for Connor, who doesn't seem that religious, but I think does seem to have, as the mother can guess, a relationship with the tree.
I agree with you 100%, and I think something about a tree, that it's solid in the ground, and that strength, and that it's always going to be there. And a tree, you could look out in your yard, year after year and after year, and it's always there. It never dies. It's not like a flower who will, will come up every season. That tree is always there, and that was like a symbol of strength and hope almost.
Right.
For him.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. You took my answers. And it's kind of like we're reading Walk Two Moons, the same thing in sixth grade. With the tree is the symbol of strength and hope, and it's there, it's the foundation.
Well, what would I tell my students who are reading A Monster Calls? I think that thematically it deals with, different things that, are common in all literature. Loss, a journey, finding strength. These are all common things, and I think it's a good example of that. But I think also it looks at, some of the harsh realities that everyone faces in life. I think right now, for example, we're talking a lot about Relay for Life and cancer and, the struggles people have had with it. And that's a conflict that Connor goes through. And it seems like a faraway conflict and a faraway problem until it reaches you. And Connor is dealing with it at a very young age. And I think it's true to how people deal with these issues. They try to find some sort of, relief, whether it's through the yew tree or through some other, form of, healing. So I think that's what I would tell them, is that this is a good example of, blending, these literary ideas with the struggles people face in real life.
I think I would probably tell my students first not to watch the movie, because there is a movie for this.
Yes.
That they would need tissues, because I cried like a baby at the end. And the tree is always asking Connor to find his tale and what his truth is, and I was trying to find it along with him. I really tried to think about what Connor would be thinking, what his story would be, and I would tell them to try not to do that. Just trying to read through it and learn like Connor was learning through the tree, and not to. I was constantly trying to find out what his tale could be, and I think I would recommend them just try to read through it without looking for the answer.
I said the same thing. You need a box of tissues at the end, and it deals with all aspects of life. Some of it's humorous, like they have some humor in it a little bit, and I don't know what else.
Well,
you said it all.
I think you guys really hit the nail on the head. The one thing with this book in particular that I think is a great thing, something that we've talked about this year, is not everything worth experiencing is, super funny or super, action packed. You can feel something from a book, and it could be a worthwhile experience and a worthwhile feeling, even if it isn't, oh my God, I laughed the whole book. Although Ms. Gales is right, it certainly does have some funny moments. I think that, it touches you in a different way maybe than a lot of my students have been grabbed by a book before.
And also, I think the illustrations are definitely
absolutely, yeah.
worth noting. I mean, they were absolutely beautiful, all the pencil drawings throughout the story that were really magnificent. And that definitely is something that I think the students should take notice of, is the beauty of all of the pencil illustrations.
All right, what a great thing. We're doing this as a whole Oceanside community, and you have the whole summer to read it. Read it as soon as you can so we can be discussing it. There's some great things to discuss, and I'm looking forward to discussing with students, with teachers, with community members, everybody.
Community is important. One of the things I love about Oceanside is the fact that it is a real community, not just, the students and not just the teachers. Everybody seems to be involved in everything going on here. And this book is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. And it's a great book, and I think everyone should read it, not just because we can have a shared experience that we can talk about together that might bring us together, but because it'll give you something maybe that you haven't felt before. And if you have been through an experience like this, I think it'll give you a chance to reflect on it maybe in a different way, in a way that, maybe you haven't looked at before. And I think it's a great book, and I'd love to see you reading it with us.
Yes, and thank you to the OSD Go Read initiative. It was a wonderful project that really brought schools together and our community together, and I look forward to discussing it with my colleagues and with my students in the fall. So get started if you haven't already.